Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery, watching the stars drift past through the main viewport. The ship had been patrolling the Outer Rim territories for 3 months now, and nothing exciting had happened. Just routine scans of empty space and the occasional merchant vessel requesting safe passage through pirate-infested systems. The Discovery was not a warship. She was an exploration vessel, built for long-range missions and scientific research. Her crew of 42 humans represented the best that Earth's colonial fleet could offer, but they were explorers and scientists, not soldiers. Morrison liked it that way. He had joined the fleet to see new worlds and meet alien civilizations, not to fight wars. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant approached from the navigation station. She was tall and lean, with short black hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Grant had served as Morrison's second-in-command for 2 years, and he trusted her judgment completely. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Coalition Command," Grant said. "They want us to extend our patrol route to include the Kepler sector." Morrison frowned. The Kepler sector was on the edge of what most spacers called the dead zone. It was a region of space filled with gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, and other hazards that made navigation extremely dangerous. Most ships avoided it entirely. "Any particular reason they want us poking around out there?" Morrison asked. "The transmission doesn't say, but I'm guessing it has something to do with the Zephyrian buildup near the border. Intelligence thinks they might be planning something." The Zephyrians were one of the galaxy's major military powers. They had been expanding their territory for decades, usually by conquering smaller civilizations that couldn't defend themselves. The Galactic Coalition had been watching them nervously, but so far no one had been willing to challenge them directly. Morrison nodded. "Set course for the Kepler sector. Standard patrol speed." The Discovery's crew went about their duties with quiet efficiency. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez, a stocky man with calloused hands and an easy smile, monitored the ship's systems from the engineering deck. Communications Officer Amy Patterson, barely 25 and fresh out of the academy, maintained contact with other Coalition vessels in the area. Dr. Helen Carter, the ship's chief science officer, spent most of her time in the laboratory studying alien artifacts and archaeological samples. She was a xenoarchaeologist, one of the few humans who specialized in studying the ruins of extinct civilizations. The galaxy was full of dead worlds and abandoned cities, remnants of species that had vanished long before humans had even learned to make fire. 3 days into their new patrol route, Amy picked up something unusual. She called Morrison to her station with an expression of confusion on her face. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the dead zone," she said. "It's very weak and heavily distorted, but it's definitely human in origin." Morrison leaned over her console. The transmission was barely audible through the static, but he could make out fragments of words. Someone was asking for help. "Can you clean it up?" he asked. Amy worked at her controls for several minutes, running the signal through various filters and enhancement programs. Gradually, a voice emerged from the noise. It was Dr. Helen Carter, but not the Carter who was currently working in the ship's laboratory. This was a recording, and the woman speaking sounded terrified. "This is Dr. Helen Carter of the Archaeological Research Station Omega-7. If anyone receives this transmission, please respond immediately. We have made a discovery that changes everything we know about human origins. The site we're excavating is not what we thought it was. It's much older, and the technology we're finding here is beyond anything in the Coalition databases." The transmission dissolved into static for a moment. Then Carter's voice returned, more urgent now. "Something is activating down here. The equipment is responding to our presence, and we don't understand why. We need immediate evacuation. The coordinates are included in this transmission. Please hurry." The message ended in a burst of electronic noise that made Amy wince and pull off her headphones. Morrison stared at the communications console. Research Station Omega-7 was supposed to be studying the ruins of a primitive alien civilization on a dead world deep in the dead zone. According to the mission reports, it was routine archaeological work, the kind of thing Dr. Carter did all the time. But the woman in that transmission had sounded genuinely frightened, and Helen Carter was not easily scared. Morrison had seen her calmly examine alien artifacts that would have sent most people running in terror. "When was that message sent?" Morrison asked. Amy checked her readings. 3 days ago, sir. There have been several attempts to send follow-up transmissions, but they're too weak to make out. Any response from Coalition Command? I've been monitoring all frequencies. There's been no response to Dr. Carter's distress call. Morrison looked at Grant, who was studying the navigational data from the transmission. The coordinates Carter had included pointed to a system deep in the dead zone, far from any established shipping lanes or patrol routes. How long to reach those coordinates? Morrison asked. Grant ran quick calculations on her console. At maximum safe speed, accounting for the hazards in that region, about 18 hours. Morrison considered his options. Coalition regulations were clear about unauthorized missions into the dead zone. The region was considered too dangerous for routine operations, and any ship entering it without specific authorization risked court-martial for the entire crew. But Dr. Carter and her team were human citizens in distress. Morrison had sworn an oath to protect human lives, and that oath didn't include exceptions for dangerous regions of space. Set course for the coordinates, he ordered. Maximum safe speed, Grant hesitated. Sir, we don't have authorization for a rescue mission in the dead zone. Coalition Command isn't responding to distress calls from human citizens, Morrison interrupted. That makes this our responsibility. Set the course, Commander. Grant nodded and began entering the new heading into the navigation system. The Discovery's engines hummed with increased power as the ship changed direction toward the dead zone. Morrison called the senior staff to the briefing room and explained the situation. Dr. Carter listened to her own voice calling for help with a puzzled expression. Don't remember making that transmission, she said. Research Station Omega-7 is studying the ruins of the Kalarian civilization. They were a spacefaring species, but their technology was fairly primitive. Nothing that would require an emergency evacuation. The voice analysis confirms it's you, Amy said, but the timestamp shows it was recorded 3 days ago, which is impossible since you've been on the Discovery for the past month. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. So either someone is playing games with us or there's another Dr. Helen Carter running around in the dead zone. There's a third possibility, Grant said quietly. What if that Dr. Carter is from a different time? What if the archaeological site she found is affecting temporal communication somehow? Morrison had heard of such things. The galaxy was full of ancient technologies that could manipulate space and time in ways that modern science barely understood. Most of them were considered too dangerous to study, which was why they usually ended up buried on dead worlds in places like the dead zone. The Discovery continued toward the coordinates, navigating carefully through fields of twisted spacetime and radiation storms that could fry a ship's systems in seconds. Morrison found himself thinking about the fear in Dr. Carter's voice. She had said the equipment was activating, responding to human presence. What kind of equipment would do that, and why would it be found in the ruins of an alien civilization that had been dead for thousands of years? 18 hours later, the Discovery emerged from a particularly nasty radiation storm to find a small research station orbiting a barren world. The station was badly damaged, its hull scarred by energy discharges, but it was still operational. Amy established contact with the station immediately. The Dr. Carter who answered their call was alive, but she sounded exactly like the woman in the distress transmission. Thank God you're here, she said. We found something incredible down on the surface. Something that's going to change everything we thought we knew about human history. The shuttle bay of Research Station Omega-7 was cramped and dimly lit. Captain Morrison and his team stepped off their transport to find Dr. Helen Carter waiting for them. She looked exactly like the Carter aboard the Discovery, but her clothes were dirty and her hands shook slightly as she greeted them. Captain Morrison, thank you for coming, she said. I wasn't sure anyone would receive our transmission. The interference in this region makes long-range communication almost impossible. Morrison studied her face carefully. Every detail matched the Dr. Carter he knew, from the small scar above her left eyebrow to the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. Dr. Carter, this is going to sound strange, but we have someone aboard our ship who looks exactly like you, Morrison said. She has the same name, the same credentials, everything. Carter's eyes widened. That's impossible. Unless, she stopped and shook her head. Let me show you what we found. Everything will make more sense then. She led them through the station's corridors to a transport pad. The station had 6 other researchers, all human, and all looking tired and frightened. They nodded respectfully to Morrison but said nothing. The transport pad took them down to the planet's surface. The world was barren and lifeless, covered in red sand and jagged rocks. But in the distance, Morrison could see something that definitely did not belong on a dead world. A massive structure rose from the desert floor, its black walls stretching up toward the sky. It was clearly artificial, built from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange energy patterns danced across its surface like living things. "We thought it was a Kaelarian temple when we first found it," Carter explained as they approached the structure. "The dating put it at about 3,000 years old, which matched what we knew about their civilization. But when we got inside, everything changed. The entrance to the structure was a perfect circle 20 feet across. There were no doors or barriers, just an opening that led into darkness. But as Morrison and his team approached, lights began to activate along the walls. The illumination revealed corridors that stretched far into the distance. The lights respond to human presence," Carter said. "Only human presence. We tested it with alien volunteers and nothing happened. But when any of us gets close, the whole place lights up." They walked through corridors that were clearly designed for humans. The ceiling height was perfect, the doorways were the right size, and even the controls they encountered were positioned exactly where human hands would naturally reach for them. "This doesn't look like alien architecture," Lieutenant Commander Grant observed. "That's because it isn't," Carter replied. "We ran every test we could think of. The materials, the construction methods, the design principles. Everything about this place is human. But according to our dating equipment, it's over 50,000 years old." Morrison stopped walking. "That's impossible. Human civilization is only about 10,000 years old. We didn't even have spaceflight until 500 years ago." Carter nodded grimly. "That's what we thought too. But the evidence is overwhelming. This facility was built by humans, and it predates our known history by tens of thousands of years." They reached a large chamber filled with strange equipment. Holographic displays flickered in the air, showing star charts and technical diagrams that hurt to look at directly. The technology was far more advanced than anything Morrison had ever seen, including the most sophisticated coalition science. "We found data cores throughout the facility," Carter continued. "The information stored in them is incredible. Star maps showing human colonies throughout this region of space. Technical specifications for weapons and ships that make our best technology look like stone tools. And records of a war against something called the Devourers." She activated one of the holographic displays. Images appeared in the air showing battles between human ships and creatures that defied description. The enemy vessels looked organic, like living things that had grown rather than being built. They moved through space in ways that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. "The records show that this ancient human civilization fought a war that lasted for thousands of years," Carter said. "The Devourers weren't just another alien species. They consumed entire worlds, absorbing the knowledge and technology of everyone they conquered. They grew stronger with every victory." Morrison watched the holographic battle scenes with growing unease. The human ships in the recordings moved with deadly precision, using tactics and weapons that were completely unfamiliar to him. These were not the peaceful explorers and traders that humanity had become. "These were warriors. How did the war end?" Grant asked. Carter manipulated the controls and new images appeared. They showed massive human fleets surrounding what looked like tiers in space itself. Energy beams lanced out from the human ships, not destroying the tiers but somehow sealing them. "The ancient humans didn't destroy the Devourers," Carter said quietly. "They imprisoned them. Those tiers in space are dimensional rifts leading to a prison dimension. The humans built quantum locks to keep them sealed, and then established monitoring stations throughout the galaxy to watch for any signs that the prison might be failing." She gestured around the chamber. "This is one of those monitoring stations. It's been watching and waiting for 50,000 years." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "Waiting for what?" Before Carter could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Red lights flashed along the walls and the holographic displays changed to show new information. Carter's face went pale as she read the data. "The quantum locks are failing," she whispered. "The dimensional rifts are starting to open. After 50,000 years, the Devourers are beginning to break free." Morrison grabbed her arm. "How long do we have?" Carter worked frantically at the controls, pulling up more data. "According to these projections, the first rifts will open completely within days. Once that happens, the Devourers will begin spreading throughout the galaxy again." "What about the modern coalition fleets?" Grant asked. "Surely they can handle this threat." Carter shook her head. You don't understand. The Devourers learn from every species they encounter. They absorb technology and adapt it for their own use. By the time the ancient humans fought them, they had already consumed dozens of advanced civilizations. More alarms began sounding, and new displays activated throughout the chamber. Morrison could see energy readings that made no sense to him, but the fear in Carter's eyes told him everything he needed to know. There's something else, Carter said, her voice barely audible over the alarms. The facility has been sending out activation signals to other monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. If the records are accurate, there are hundreds of them, all containing weapons and technology from the ancient human empire. She turned to face Morrison directly. Captain, I think the reason I exist in two places is because this facility somehow pulled me from another timeline or dimension. It needed someone who could operate human technology to help prepare for what's coming. Morrison stared at the holographic displays showing the failing prison dimensions. Somewhere in the depths of space, an enemy that had terrified an entire galaxy was beginning to stir. The peaceful humanity he knew was about to discover that their ancestors had been something very different. We need to contact Coalition Command immediately, Morrison said. Carter shook her head. The interference from the dimensional rifts is blocking all long-range communications. We're on our own, Captain, and according to these readings, the first Devourer scouts will arrive in this system within hours. Morrison felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like never before. His exploration vessel and its crew of 42 were about to face an enemy that had required the combined might of an ancient human empire to defeat. The chamber's lights flickered as more systems came online throughout the facility. Whatever was happening, Morrison realized that the sleeping giant of human military history was beginning to wake up. The facility's alarms grew louder as more systems activated throughout the ancient structure. Captain Morrison watched in amazement as walls that had appeared solid began to slide apart, revealing hidden chambers filled with technology that hummed with power. Dr. Carter worked frantically at the holographic controls, her fingers dancing across displays that responded to her touch as if they had been waiting for her. Captain, you need to see this, she called out over the noise of the alarms. Morrison and Grant approached the main display, where new information was scrolling past in streams of data. The text was in English, but it used terms and concepts that Morrison didn't recognize. Words like reality anchors, dimensional disruptors, and quantum warfare doctrine filled the screens. The facility's main AI is coming online, Carter explained. It's been dormant for 50,000 years, but it's starting to wake up. And it recognizes us as human. The air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer, and a figure materialized before them. It was a hologram of a tall man in what looked like military uniform, but the design was unlike anything Morrison had ever seen. The man's face was stern and weathered, with eyes that seemed to look right through them. Greetings, humans of the descendant generation, the hologram said in perfect English. I am Sentinel Protocol 7, Guardian of Monitoring Station Kepler Alpha 9. I have been waiting for your arrival. Morrison stepped forward cautiously. You've been waiting for us specifically? I have been waiting for any humans to arrive when the Devourer containment began to fail, Sentinel replied. The quantum locks are weakening, and dimensional rifts are opening throughout the galaxy. The enemy that your ancestors fought is returning. Grant looked at the data streaming across the displays. How much time do we have? Devourer scout vessels will emerge from the nearest rift in approximately 4 hours, Sentinel said. They will detect this facility immediately and attempt to destroy it before the defense systems can activate fully. Morrison felt his stomach tighten. What defense systems? Instead of answering with words, Sentinel activated new displays throughout the chamber. Morrison watched in stunned silence as the screens showed the true extent of the ancient facility. What they had seen so far was just the tip of an enormous underground complex that stretched for miles in every direction. Deep beneath the planet's surface were weapons that defied explanation. Energy cannons that could crack planets in half. Reality anchors that could lock space and time itself. And something called a dimensional disruptor that could apparently tear holes in the fabric of the universe. Your ancestors built this facility to do more than just monitor the Devourer prison, Sentinel explained. It was designed to be a fortress, capable of defending itself against the full might of a Devourer fleet. But it requires human authorization to activate its weapons. Morrison stared at the weapon specifications scrolling past on the screens. The power levels were beyond anything he could comprehend. A single shot from the smallest cannon could vaporize his ship and everything around it for miles. "I'm not authorized to activate weapons of this magnitude," Morrison said. "I'm an exploration captain, not a military commander." In the absence of the high command, any human officer has the authority to activate emergency protocols, Sentinel replied. "Captain Morrison, you are currently the highest-ranking human military officer within range of this facility. The decision is yours." Before Morrison could respond, new alarms began sounding. These were different from the others, more urgent and threatening. The holographic displays changed to show sensor readings from space around the planet. "Dimensional rift opening," Sentinel announced. "Devourer scouts arriving ahead of schedule." Morrison looked at the main display and felt his blood run cold. 3 massive shapes were emerging from what looked like a tear in space itself. The ships were unlike anything in the Coalition databases. They seemed to be alive, their hulls pulsing with organic rhythms and covered with what looked like scales or armor plating. "Dear God," Grant whispered. "How big are those things?" "Each scout vessel is approximately 3 kilometers in length," Sentinel replied calmly. "They carry enough firepower to sterilize a planet's surface within hours." Morrison activated his communicator. Morrison to Discovery. "Emergency evacuation. All personnel to return to ship immediately." Amy Patterson's voice crackled through the interference. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures appearing in the system." "What's happening down there?" "We're about to be attacked by something that makes the Zephyrian fleet look like children's toys," Morrison replied. "Get the ship ready for immediate departure." But even as he spoke, Morrison knew they wouldn't be fast enough. The Discovery was a good ship, but she was designed for exploration, not combat. Against enemies like the ones approaching, she might as well be made of paper. Sentinel seemed to read his thoughts.
"Captain, your vessel cannot escape the Devourer scouts."
"Their ships are faster and more maneuverable than anything in your current human fleet. If you attempt to flee, they will hunt you down and destroy you." "Then what do you suggest?" Morrison asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "Activate the facility's defense systems," Sentinel said. "Show the Devourers that humanity still remembers how to fight." Dr. Carter looked up from her console. "Captain, I'm reading massive power buildups throughout the facility. Whatever these weapons are, they're already charging themselves. The facility is preparing for battle whether we authorize it or not." Morrison watched the Devourer ships moving through space with predatory grace. They had detected the planet and were approaching rapidly, their hulls glowing with energy that made his skin crawl. These were the creatures that had consumed entire civilizations, and now they were coming for him and his crew. "Sentinel, if I authorize the activation of these weapons, what happens next?" Morrison asked. "The energy signatures will be detected by every major power in the galaxy," Sentinel replied. "They will know that humanity possesses technology far beyond what you have revealed. The balance of power in the galaxy will change permanently." Grant grabbed Morrison's arm. "Sir, if these things are as dangerous as the records show, we might not have a choice. If the Devourers break free and spread throughout the galaxy, everyone dies anyway." Morrison looked around the chamber at the incredible technology surrounding them. 50,000 years ago, his ancestors had built weapons that could destroy gods. They had fought a war against creatures that devoured worlds, and they had won. Now their descendants were about to face the same enemy, with nothing but peaceful exploration ships and diplomatic protocols. The Devourer scouts were getting closer. Morrison could see them on the displays, their organic hulls rippling with anticipation. They had found prey and they were preparing to feed. "Sentinel, I need to know something," Morrison said. "When the ancient humans fought the Devourers, what kind of people were they? What did they believe in?" The AI was quiet for a moment before answering. "They believe that some threats are so absolute that any response is justified. They believe that mercy toward an enemy that shows no mercy is not virtue but suicide. They believe that sometimes, to protect what is good in the universe, you must become something terrible." Morrison closed his eyes and thought of his crew aboard the Discovery. He thought of the billions of humans throughout the galaxy who had no idea what was coming for them. He thought of all the alien civilizations that would be consumed if the Devourers were allowed to spread. When he opened his eyes, his decision was made. "Activate all defense systems," Morrison ordered. "Full authorization, Captain Jake Morrison, UES Discovery." The chamber exploded with light as the ancient facility came fully online. Deep beneath the planet's surface, weapons that had slept for 50,000 years began to wake up. The galaxy was about to remember why, long ago, even the most terrible enemies had learned to fear human military history. The moment Morrison gave his authorization, the ancient facility transformed completely. What had been a quiet archaeological site became something that resembled the nerve center of a military fortress. Walls that looked like solid stone split apart to reveal massive displays showing tactical information from across the star system. The floor beneath their feet vibrated as enormous machines deep underground came to life after 50,000 years of sleep. Sentinel Protocol 7's hologram flickered and solidified, taking on a more commanding presence. Defense systems activated. All weapon platforms are coming online. Estimated time to full combat readiness, 6 minutes. Morrison watched the displays showing the approaching Devourer scouts. The alien ships had detected the facility's activation and were accelerating toward the planet. Their organic hulls pulsed with dark energy, and Morrison could see smaller shapes detaching from the main vessels like parasites leaving a host. "What are those smaller ships?" Grant asked, pointing to the new contacts on the screen. "Devourer feeding pods," Sentinel replied. "They will attempt to land on the planet's surface and consume any organic matter they find. Each pod contains approximately 50 combat units." Dr. Carter looked up from her console with alarm. "The research station has 12 people on it. If those things reach the surface, the station's personnel have been transported to the facility's secure levels," Sentinel interrupted. "Emergency protocols activated automatically when the Devourers arrived." Morrison felt a moment of relief, but it was quickly replaced by concern for his own crew. "What about the Discovery?" New information appeared on the displays showing his ship's position in orbit around the planet. The Discovery looked incredibly small compared to the massive Devourer scouts, but Morrison could see that she was moving toward a specific location. "Your vessel is being guided to a defensive position within the facility's shield perimeter," Sentinel explained. "The ancient defense grid includes orbital platforms that will protect your ship during the battle." Morrison activated his communicator. "Morrison to Discovery. Danny, what's your status up there?" Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice came through clearly despite the interference. "Captain, you're not going to believe this, but our ship is being escorted by some kind of automated defense platforms. They just appeared out of nowhere, and they're bigger than anything I've ever seen." On the tactical display, Morrison could see the orbital platforms Rodriguez was talking about. They were massive structures, each one the size of a small moon, bristling with weapon systems that dwarfed anything in the Coalition fleet. "How many orbital platforms are there?" Morrison asked. 47 combat platforms currently active," Sentinel replied. "Each one carries enough firepower to destroy a Zephyrian battle fleet. Your ancestors did not believe in building small weapons. The first Devourer scout reached weapons range and opened fire. Beams of dark energy lanced down toward the planet, but they struck an invisible barrier and scattered harmlessly. The facility's shields were far more powerful than Morrison had imagined. "Shields holding at 98%, Sentinel announced. "Beginning counterattack." Morrison watched in awe as the ancient human weapons responded. Energy beams erupted from hidden positions all across the planet's surface, reaching up into space to strike the Devourer ships. But these were not the simple laser cannons that Morrison was familiar with. These weapons seemed to tear at the very fabric of space around their targets. The first Devourer scout took a direct hit and simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive organic ship bristling with weapons, and the next moment there was nothing but empty space. "Not debris, not an explosion, just nothing. Reality anchor impact," Sentinel explained calmly. "The target has been removed from this dimension." The second Devourer scout tried to evade the incoming fire, but the orbital platforms had joined the battle. Morrison watched in fascination as weapons that looked like geometric patterns made of pure energy reached out to touch the alien ship. Where they made contact, the scout's organic armor began to dissolve. "Dimensional disruptor effect," Sentinel said. The target's molecular structures being unraveled at the quantum level. Morrison had seen naval battles before, but this was something entirely different. This wasn't war as he understood it. This was the systematic elimination of an enemy using weapons that operated on principles he couldn't even comprehend. The third Devourer scout managed to launch its feeding pods before the ancient weapons could destroy it. Morrison watched dozens of smaller ships streak toward the planet's surface, each one carrying creatures that had consumed entire civilizations. Feeding pods incoming, Grant reported. Impact in 30 seconds. Surface defense systems are active, Sentinel replied. The planet's surface erupted with new weapons. Towers of crystalline material rose from the ground, each one generating fields of energy that reached up to intercept the falling pods. But instead of destroying the enemy ships, the fields seemed to trap them in bubbles of distorted space. The feeding pods are contained in temporal displacement fields, Sentinel explained. They are experiencing time at a rate of 1 second per hour. The creatures inside are effectively frozen. Morrison stared at the tactical displays. In less than 10 minutes, 3 massive enemy ships had been completely eliminated, and their supporting forces had been neutralized without firing a single shot that actually killed them. The ancient humans had not just built better weapons, they had built weapons that redefined what warfare could be. Sentinel, how are these weapons so effective against the Devourers? Morrison asked. According to the records, they had adapted to fight dozens of advanced civilizations. The Devourers adapt to conventional weapons and tactics, Sentinel replied. They learn from energy weapons, kinetic weapons, and biological warfare. But your ancestors developed weapons that operate outside the normal parameters of physics. The Devourers cannot adapt to attacks that exist in different dimensions or that manipulate time itself. The battle was over, but Morrison knew it was just the beginning. The energy signatures from the facility's weapons had been detected across half the galaxy. Every major power would know that humanity had been hiding technology that made their most advanced fleets look like toys. Amy Patterson's voice crackled over the communicator. Captain, we're receiving transmission requests from over 50 different sources. The Zephyrian Empire, the Crystalline Hegemony, the Vorthan Syndicate, even Coalition Command. Everyone wants to know what just happened. Morrison looked at the displays showing the aftermath of the battle. Where 3 massive enemy ships had been, there was now only empty space. The orbital defense platforms were still active, their weapons trained on the dimensional rift where more enemies might appear. What do I tell them? Morrison asked. Sentinel's hologram flickered with what might have been amusement. Tell them the truth, Captain. Tell them that humanity remembers how to fight. Morrison opened a general communications channel that would reach every ship and listening post within 100 light-years. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 50,000 years of hidden history. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Ship Discovery. To all listening vessels and stations, be advised that humanity has activated ancient defense systems in response to an existential threat to all galactic civilizations. The enemy known as the Devourers has begun to escape from containment, and we are prepared to defend this galaxy against their return. He paused, knowing that his next words would change everything. Any government or military force that wishes to discuss alliance terms may approach our position, but understand that humanity is no longer the peaceful species you thought you knew. We are the descendants of the civilization that built these weapons, and we will use them to protect ourselves and our allies. The galaxy had just learned that the humans they thought they knew had never really existed at all. The response to Morrison's broadcast was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, ships began arriving in the system from every corner of the galaxy. Zephyrian battlecruisers, crystalline research vessels, Vorthan corporate fleets, and dozens of ships from smaller civilizations all came to see what humanity had revealed. Captain Morrison stood in the ancient facility's command center, watching the tactical displays as more ships appeared every few minutes. The orbital defense platforms tracked each new arrival with weapons that could erase entire fleets from existence. But Sentinel Protocol 7 had assured him that the automated systems would not fire unless directly attacked. Lieutenant Commander Grant approached with a report from the communication station. Sir, we've received formal requests for meetings from 37 different governments. The Zephyrian Empire is demanding to know why we've been hiding military technology. The Crystalline Hegemony wants to examine our weapons systems, and Coalition Command is ordering us to stand down immediately. Morrison almost laughed at that last demand. Stand down? We just saved the galaxy from an enemy that could have consumed every living thing in it, and they want us to stand down. Dr. Carter looked up from her workstation where she had been studying the ancient records. Captain, according to these files, there are over 200 similar facilities throughout the galaxy. Most of them are on dead worlds in regions that other species avoid. The ancient humans built a network of defense stations that spans half the known galaxy. Sentinel's hologram appeared beside them. Dr. Carter is correct. The activation of this facility has sent awakening signals to all other monitoring stations. Within 72 hours, the full defense network will be operational. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What does that mean for the current galactic powers?
It means that humanity now possesses the most advanced military force in the galaxy, Sentinel replied.
Your ancestors designed these systems to be operated by a unified human command structure. As the senior human officer who activated the network, you are now effectively the supreme commander of all ancient defense systems. Before Morrison could respond to that shocking news, Amy Patterson's voice came over the communicator. Captain, you need to hear this transmission. It's from Earth. The main display activated to show Admiral Rebecca Hayes, the highest-ranking officer in Earth's colonial fleet. She looked tired and confused, but her voice was steady as she spoke. Captain Morrison, I don't know what you've gotten yourself into out there, but the entire galaxy is in chaos. Every major power is mobilizing their fleets, and half of them are demanding that Earth explain what you've done. I need you to return to Coalition space immediately for debriefing. Morrison looked at Sentinel, who simply nodded. Admiral Hayes, with respect, I don't think you understand the situation. We've discovered that humanity had an advanced civilization 50,000 years ago, and we're now facing the return of an enemy that nearly destroyed the galaxy once before. I can't abandon the defense systems that are protecting us. Admiral Hayes leaned forward in her chair. Captain, what exactly are these defense systems? Morrison gestured to the displays around him. Weapons that can remove enemy ships from reality itself, Admiral. Technology that makes our best warships look like canoes. The ancient humans built a military force that could fight gods, and now it's our responsibility. The transmission from Earth was interrupted by alarms throughout the facility. New contacts were appearing on the long-range sensors, and these were not exploration ships or diplomatic vessels. These were devourer battle fleets, massive formations of organic ships emerging from dimensional rifts throughout the galaxy. Sentinel's expression grew serious. The main devourer force has detected the activation of our defense network. They are beginning a coordinated assault on all human positions. Morrison watched the tactical displays as red icons appeared across the galaxy. Dozens of dimensional rifts were opening, each one disgorging fleets of enemy ships that dwarfed anything the current galactic powers could field. But green icons were also appearing as the ancient human defense stations came online. How many defense stations are activating? Morrison asked. 217 stations are now operational, Sentinel replied. Each one is equivalent in firepower to this facility. The network your ancestors built is designed to fight a galaxy-wide war. The first engagement began near the crystalline hegemony's home system. Morrison watched on the displays as a massive devourer fleet encountered an awakening human defense station. The battle lasted less than an hour, ending with the complete destruction of the enemy force. Similar engagements were happening throughout the galaxy as ancient human weapons met the returning devourers. But the real shock came when reports started arriving from the major galactic powers themselves. The Zephyrian Empire, the mightiest military force in the galaxy, had encountered a single human defense station and been politely but firmly ordered to withdraw from the system. When they refused, the station had disabled their entire fleet without firing a shot, simply by generating fields that shut down their weapons and engines. Grant read the reports with amazement. Sir, the ancient defense systems aren't just fighting the devourers. They're establishing human control over strategic systems throughout the galaxy. Every major shipping lane, every important resource system, every military stronghold, there's a human defense station nearby, and they're all coming online. Morrison began to understand the true scope of what they had awakened. The ancient humans had not just built weapons to fight the devourers. They had built a network designed to control the entire galaxy, ensuring that when humanity returned to the stars, they would find a galaxy prepared to accept their leadership. Communications from across the galaxy confirmed what Morrison was beginning to suspect. The ancient defense stations were not just defending against the devourers. They were announcing humanity's return as the galaxy's dominant power. Ship after ship reported encountering human technology that could disable their weapons, control their movements, and dictate their actions. Admiral Hayes appeared on the display again, her face pale with shock. Morrison, I'm receiving reports that human defense systems are appearing throughout Coalition space. They're not attacking anyone, but they're making it very clear that they're in charge now. What have you done? Morrison looked around the command center at technology that could reshape reality itself. He thought about the peaceful humanity he had grown up with, the explorers and traders who had joined the Galactic Coalition as junior partners. That humanity was gone now, replaced by something far older and more dangerous. I activated our heritage, Admiral, Morrison replied. The galaxy is about to learn that we were never the species they thought we were. The final reports came in from across the galaxy. The Devourer invasion had been completely defeated, their fleets destroyed or imprisoned by weapons that operated beyond conventional understanding. But in the process, every major power had been forced to acknowledge that humanity now controlled technology that made them irrelevant. Sentinel turned to Morrison with something that might have been pride. Captain, the network is fully operational, the galaxy is secure, and humanity has reclaimed its rightful place as the dominant civilization. Your ancestors would be proud. Morrison looked out at the stars through the facility's viewport. Somewhere out there, alien governments were frantically trying to understand how their human neighbors had become their human masters in the span of a single day. The peaceful explorers and traders were gone, replaced by the descendants of warriors who had once fought gods and won. The galaxy had finally learned why. 50,000 years ago, even the most terrible enemies had learned to fear human military history, and now they would learn to fear it again.